The day I realized my marriage was beyond saving, I was standing in the cereal aisle at Walmart, staring at the generic brand cornflakes while my husband Mark's credit card declined for the third time that month. The same husband who, just yesterday, had transferred $5,000 to his sister Celeste for her emergency renovation needs. I'm Fiona, and this is how I learned to stop being a doormat and start being the architect of my own revenge. I'm so sorry. I muttered to the cashier, fishing through my purse for my emergency cash. $23.48 for basic groceries shouldn't have been an emergency. But here we were. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Celeste needs me to co-sign for her new car. Don't wait up. I gripped the shopping cart handle until my knuckles turned white. The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright, too harsh. A woman with a toddler gave me a concerned look as she passed by. "You okay, honey?" she asked. I forced a smile. Just peachy. Back home, I found myself sorting through bills at our kitchen table. The marble countertops that Mark had insisted on installing last year gleamed mockingly at me. We'd taken out a second mortgage for those renovations, yet somehow there was always money for Celeste's emergencies. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Celeste standing there in designer clothes that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. "Fiona, is Mark home?" She breezed past me without waiting for an answer, her perfume leaving a suffocating trail. "He's co-signing for your car, remember?" "Oh, right." She laughed, dropping her Gucci bag on my carefully organized bills. "I actually need to borrow your good jewelry for a charity gala, the one Mark bought you for your anniversary." I thought about the diamond necklace I'd never worn because Mark had returned it the next day, claiming we needed the money for household expenses. He'd never told Celeste that part. "I don't have it anymore," I said quietly. Celeste's perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up. "What do you mean? Mark says a lot of things, Celeste." I moved her bag off my papers. "Like how he says you're looking for a job, but somehow you're always too busy planning galas." Her face hardened for a moment before morphing into a practiced pout. "You know how hard I've had it since Mom and Dad died. Mark's all I have." "And what about what Mark has? What about what I have?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. The front door opened and Mark walked in, all 6 feet of corporate success in his tailored suit. "Baby sis," he called out, completely ignoring my presence. "Got your new car all sorted. You're going to love it." I watched them embrace. Noticed how Celeste shot me a triumphant look over Mark's shoulder. That's when I made my decision. Later that night, after they'd left for dinner without even inviting me, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Aunt Bonnie? It's Fiona." I took a deep breath. "Remember when you told me you'd always be there if I needed help? I think it's time we talked." There was a pause on the other end. "I was wondering when you'd call," Aunt Bonnie said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who knew exactly what I was going through. "Tell me everything." I glanced at the stack of bills on the table, at the empty space where my anniversary necklace should have been, at the text from Mark saying he was staying at Celeste's tonight to help her settle in with the new car. "It's a long story," I said, feeling stronger already. "I've got time," Aunt Bonnie replied. "And more importantly, I've got resources. You'd be amazed what a retired corporate lawyer knows about family dynamics and hidden assets." For the first time in months, I smiled. Not the forced smile I gave the cashier or the neighbors or Celeste. This was different. This was real. "I think," I said slowly, "it's time I learned exactly what those resources are." As I hung up the phone, I heard Mark's latest text notification. Probably another excuse, another emergency, another reason why Celeste needed our money more than we did. But this time, I didn't immediately check it. Instead, I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Every transfer, every excuse, every manipulation. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice. And with Aunt Bonnie in my corner, I finally had a fighting chance. Let them have their dinner. Let them make their plans. Let them think I was just the quiet, understanding wife who would always be there to pick up the pieces. They had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks after my call with Aunt Bonnie, I sat across from Celeste at our weekly family dinner, watching her wave her new diamond tennis bracelet around while she regaled us with stories about her upcoming Mediterranean cruise. It's just what I need after all the stress, she sighed, taking another sip of the $100 wine Mark had bought specially for her. The charity work has been so demanding. I stabbed at my salad. Which charity was that again? Celeste's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Oh, the one for underprivileged children. Right, I smiled sweetly. The one you've been planning the gala for. When is that happening? Mark shot me a warning look. Fiona, don't interrogate your sister-in-law. Just making conversation, I said, reaching for my water. I'd love to help with the gala. Maybe I could talk to the event coordinator? Celeste's face flushed. They're very particular about who they work with. Just then, her phone rang. She glanced at it, and for a split second, I saw panic flash across her face. Excuse me, she muttered, practically running from the table. I could hear her harsh whispers from the hallway. I told you never to call this number. No, I don't have it. Listen, you can't just... I'll handle it. When she returned, her hands were shaking slightly. Mark, oblivious as ever, was scrolling through his phone. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Fine, she snapped. Then, smoothing her features, just a pushy vendor. Later that evening, I met my coworker Ruben at a coffee shop 3 towns over. No chance of running into anyone we knew. You were right, he said, sliding a folder across the table. I did some digging through public records. Your sister-in-law? She's got creditors coming after her from 6 different states. I flipped through the papers, my heart racing. How much? North of 200,000, and that's just what I could find. I thought about all the emergency transfers Mark had made to her over the years. Where's it all going? Ruben leaned forward. Gambling debts, mostly. Some high-end shopping sprees. But here's the kicker. There's no record of any charity work. Not a single registered organization under her name. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Bonnie. Got something. Meet me tomorrow. Bring your passport. My passport? I said out loud. Ruben raised an eyebrow. Your aunt finds something good? We'll see. I gathered the papers. Thanks for this, Ruben. I owe you. Just be careful, Fiona. People like Celeste, they're dangerous when cornered. I got home to find Mark pacing in the kitchen. Where were you? He demanded. Book club. I lied smoothly. Why? Did you need something? He ran his hands through his hair. Celeste called. She's in trouble. I need to transfer her some money. How much this time? 50,000. I nearly choked. 50,000? Mark, that's our entire emergency fund. She's family, he shouted. She needs us. And what about us? I gestured around our kitchen. What about the leak in the roof? The car that needs repairs? Your own sister is bleeding you dry and you can't even see it. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. I slammed my hand on the counter. When was the last time you checked our bank balance? When was the last time you actually looked at what Celeste does with all this money? His face darkened. You're just jealous because you don't have any family left. The words hit like a slap. I stepped back, nodding slowly. You're right. I don't have family like Celeste. Thank God for that. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Aunt Bonnie. Change of plans. Come now. You need to see this. I grabbed my keys. Where are you going? Mark called after me. To see my non-existent family, I shot back. As I drove to Aunt Bonnie's house, my hands were steady on the wheel. Mark's words should have hurt more, but all I felt was a cold clarity. He'd chosen his side long ago. Now it was time to choose mine. My phone rang. Celeste's number. Probably calling to smooth things over, to manipulate me into supporting her latest scheme. I declined the call and turned up the radio. Whatever Aunt Bonnie had found, whatever was in those documents Ruben had given me, one thing was becoming crystal clear. Celeste's house of cards was about to come crashing down. And when it did, I'd be there to watch every single piece fall. I pulled into Aunt Bonnie's driveway, where her porch light cast long shadows across the lawn. Through her window, I could see her silhouette waiting, holding what looked like a thick manila envelope. Game on, Celeste. Game on. Aunt Bonnie's home office smelled like leather and old books. She spread photographs across her mahogany desk while I sat frozen, staring at a face I knew all too well. Only it wasn't Celeste in these pictures. Not exactly. Meet Jessica, Aunt Bonnie said, tapping one photo. Or Patricia, or Sandra, depending on which state you're in. The woman in the photos had Celeste's face, but different hair colors, different styles, different lives. How did you get these? I have friends in the FBI's white-collar division. Aunt Bonnie's lips curved into a smile. Let's just say your sister-in-law has been on their radar for quite some time. She pulled out more documents. 3 different social security numbers, 5 marriages, all ending mysteriously when the husband's accounts were drained. And here's the kicker. She slid forward a death certificate. The real Celeste Weaver died 23 years ago, at age 6. My hands started shaking. Mark's real sister has been dead for over 2 decades. This woman? She's a professional con artist who picked your husband as her next Mark. I thought about all the stories Celeste had told about growing up with Mark, all the shared childhood memories. But how did she know enough details to convince him? Social media, obituaries, public records. Aunt Bonnie leaned back in her chair. These people are thorough. They study their marks for months, sometimes years. My phone buzzed, another text from Mark. Where are you? Celeste is crying. You need to apologize. I ignored it. Does the FBI know where she is now? They're building a case, but here's where it gets interesting. Aunt Bonnie pulled out bank statements. Your husband's been moving money through some questionable offshore accounts. If the FBI starts looking too closely at Celeste, they'll find Mark's financial misconduct too. I finished. Exactly. And unlike his dear sister, he can't just disappear and change identities. I stood up and walked to the window, watching rain start to fall. He'll lose everything. Unless... Aunt Bonnie's voice took on a careful tone. I turned back to her. Unless what? Unless someone helps the FBI focus solely on Celeste. Someone with access to both Mark's and Celeste's financial records. Someone who could ensure Mark's transactions appear as the actions of a deceived victim rather than a willing participant. My heart raced. That would require perfect timing. Good thing you have a former corporate lawyer for an aunt. She handed me a USB drive. Everything you need is here. But Fiona... She gripped my hand. Once we start this, there's no going back. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Celeste. Please come home. I need to explain. You don't understand what you're doing. I laughed darkly. That's where you're wrong, sis. I know exactly what I'm doing. Aunt Bonnie raised an eyebrow. Should I be concerned? No, I said, pocketing the USB drive. But Celeste should be. Just then, my phone rang. Ruben. You need to get to the office, he said without preamble. Now. It's almost midnight. Celeste is here. She's trying to access Mark's work computer. I grabbed my keys. Call security. Tell them not to let her leave. Already did. He paused. Fiona. She's desperate. Whatever you've got planned, you might want to speed up the timeline. I looked at Aunt Bonnie, who was already gathering the documents. Send everything to my secure email, I told her. I'm heading to the office. Be careful, she warned. Desperate people are dangerous. The drive to the office was a blur of rain and streetlights. When I arrived, security met me at the door. She's in the executive suite, the guard said. Your colleague is keeping her talking. I could hear Celeste's voice as I approached Mark's office. You don't understand. I just need 5 minutes on his computer. It's a family emergency. Sorry, Ruben's calm voice replied. Company policy, no access without authorization. I stepped into view. Hello, Celeste? Or should I say Jessica? Patricia? Sandra? She whirled around, her face going pale. You don't know what you're talking about. Really? I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos Aunt Bonnie had given me. Because you look amazing as a brunette in your Milwaukee days. For a moment, just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the predator beneath the polish. Whatever you think you know, she said quietly. Remember who Mark will believe. I smiled. That's exactly what I'm counting on. The elevator dinged, and Mark's voice echoed down the hallway. Security called me. What's going on? Celeste and I locked eyes. The game was about to change, and only one of us knew all the rules. Up here, Mark, I called out. Your sister has something she needs to tell you. Mark burst into the office, his tie askew, rain dripping from his coat. What's the meaning of this? Celeste, are you okay? Before either of us could speak, Reuben cleared his throat. Sir, we caught her trying to access your computer without authorization. As head of IT security, I had to alert the authorities. Authorities? Mark laughed nervously. Come on, she's my sister. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Celeste shot me a triumphant look before turning to Mark with tears in her eyes. I was trying to protect you, she sobbed. The company, they're stealing from you. I found proof. What? Mark's face darkened. Large transfers, she continued, her voice trembling perfectly. Someone's been moving money through offshore accounts under your name. I was trying to get evidence before they could delete it. I had to admire her quick thinking. She was throwing Mark under the bus while positioning herself as his savior. That's interesting, I said calmly, pulling out my phone. Because I have proof of different transfers. Ones that you authorized, Mark. To accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and... I checked my notes. Isn't it funny how they all trace back to properties owned by someone named Jessica Patterson? Celeste's face went white. Who's Jessica Patterson? Mark demanded. Why don't you ask your sister? I suggested. Oh wait, I forgot. She's not actually your sister. What are you talking about? Mark turned to Celeste. Tell her she's crazy. But Celeste wasn't looking at Mark anymore. She was staring at the doorway, where two men in suits had just appeared, badges in hand. Ms. Weaver, one of them said. Or should we say Ms. Patterson? We've been looking for you. Mark, she screamed, grabbing his arm. You have to help me, they're lying, they're all lying. Agent Roberts, I said, nodding to the FBI agent. Thank you for coming so quickly. You called the FBI? Mark roared at me. On my own sister? Sir, Agent Roberts interrupted. This woman is not Celeste Weaver. The real Celeste Weaver died in 1999. This woman is wanted in connection with multiple cases of fraud across 7 states. Mark stumbled backward like he'd been punched. No, that's not... We grew up together. Did you? I asked softly. Or did she just know all the right stories to tell? Think about it, Mark. Can you remember a single childhood memory that wasn't just her repeating something you'd told her? The baseball game, he whispered. When Dad took us to... Let me guess, Agent Roberts said. Yankees versus Red Sox, 1992? She got that story from your Facebook post 3 years ago. Celeste suddenly bolted for the door, but the second agent caught her easily. As they handcuffed her, she turned to Mark with desperate eyes. Everything I did for us, she cried. You were like the brother I never had. Take her, Agent Roberts ordered. As they led her away, he turned to Mark. Sir, we'll need to speak with you about those financial transactions. Mark's face crumpled. I don't understand. All those transfers, she said they were for medical bills. For the charity. There was no charity, I said quietly, just like there was no sister. Mr. Emerson, Agent Roberts continued, given the circumstances, we'll need to freeze your accounts pending investigation. My accounts? Mark's voice rose in panic. But I have meetings tomorrow, payroll to process. I can't... I can help, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. I have copies of every transfer, I continued. Documentation showing how she manipulated and coerced you. Evidence that you were a victim of her scheme, not a willing participant. You'd do that? Mark asked, his voice small. After everything? Yes, I said, but on one condition. Anything. You sign everything over to me. The house, the accounts, all of it. I'll help clear your name, but I want control. That's blackmail, he whispered. No, I corrected him. That's consequences. Agent Roberts pretended to check his phone, giving us a moment. Mark looked broken, defeated. The mighty provider, the controlling husband, reduced to this. I don't have a choice, do I? You always had choices, Mark. You just made the wrong ones. He nodded slowly, then turned to Agent Roberts. I'll cooperate fully. Just, can we do this somewhere private? As they led Mark away, Reuben touched my shoulder. You okay? I watched my husband disappear down the hallway, shoulders slumped, while somewhere in the building, his fake sister was probably still screaming about betrayal. Actually, I said, I'm better than okay. I'm free. The next morning, I sat in Aunt Bonnie's kitchen, watching Mark's meltdown play out on my laptop screen. The security footage from his initial FBI interview was better than any reality TV show. I trusted her. His voice cracked through the speakers. Every Christmas, every birthday, and she knew things only my sister could know. Social media is a gold mine, Aunt Bonnie commented, pouring more coffee. People share their whole lives online these days. My phone buzzed. Maria, my closest friend, who'd been kept in the dark until now. Turn on the news. Your sister-in-law's everywhere. I switched tabs to find Celeste's, or rather Jessica's, mugshot plastered across the local news website. Serial fraudster caught. Prominent businessman's sister revealed as imposter. Your handiwork? I asked Aunt Bonnie. She shrugged innocently. I may have tipped off a few reporters. The media loves a good scandal. My phone rang again. Mark's mother. I should take this, I said, stepping onto the porch. Hello, Sandra. Fiona. She was crying. How could we not know? All these years, my baby girl. I thought she'd come back to us. Sandra, I'm so sorry. And I was, genuinely. She was the only innocent victim in all this. The FBI showed me pictures of my real Celeste's grave. I've been sending birthday cards to a stranger. Her voice hardened suddenly. But you knew. You figured it out. Yes. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Would you have believed me? I asked gently. Over your precious son's word? Silence. That's what I thought. Back inside, Aunt Bonnie was watching new footage, Mark being escorted into the federal building. Your husband's lawyer called, she said. He's willing to sign everything over, no contest. Of course he is. His only other option is fighting this in court while the FBI examines every transaction he's ever made. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won? Ask your aunt about the summer of '95. Everyone has secrets. See. I showed it to Aunt Bonnie, who laughed. Amateur. She's trying to create doubt, divide us. Classic con artist move. Is there something from '95 I should know about? Only that I spent it backpacking through Europe. Nice try, Celeste. Reuben called next. You need to come to the office. The board's called an emergency meeting. Why? I'm on leave. They're voting on new leadership. With Mark's position vacant, I understood immediately. They're worried about stability. Exactly. And you're the only one who knows where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. I looked at Aunt Bonnie, who nodded encouragingly. Go, show them who you really are. An hour later, I walked into the boardroom wearing the power suit I'd bought months ago but never had the courage to wear. 12 pairs of eyes turned to me. Mrs. Emerson, the board chairman began. Just Fiona, please, I interrupted. And before we start, I'd like to present something. I connected my laptop to the projector, pulling up spreadsheets and documentation. Over the past 6 months, I've been quietly restructuring our international accounts. You'll find everything is now properly regulated and transparent. I've also identified several cost-saving measures that could increase our profit margin by 18% next quarter. The chairman's eyebrows shot up. You did this without authorization? No, I smiled. I did this with Mark's electronic signature, which he gave me access to for household expenses. I just had a broader definition of household than he realized. Murmurs around the table. Furthermore, I continued, I've already spoken to our major clients. They're aware of the situation with Mark and have agreed to maintain their contracts, with me as their new point of contact. The chairman leaned forward. You've been planning this. Let's just say I learned to think ahead. I met each board member's eyes. So we can spend the next hour debating my qualifications, or we can discuss my strategy for the company's future. Your choice. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Celeste. You're just like me, a manipulator, a fraud. I typed back, no, I'm better. I learned from your mistakes. Then I turned back to the board, ready to show them exactly what the quiet, underestimated wife could do. Shall we begin? The chairman nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. The floor is yours, Fiona. As I launched into my presentation, I felt lighter than I had in years. Celeste had taught me an invaluable lesson. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's using their own game to build something better. 2 weeks after the board meeting, I sat across from Mark in his lawyer's office, watching him sign away everything he'd spent years controlling. His hand trembled as he scrawled his signature on each page. Initial here, his lawyer pointed, and here. I still don't understand, Mark muttered, not looking at me. How long were you planning this? I wasn't. I replied honestly. Not until you chose her over me one too many times. The door opened and Agent Roberts entered, nodding to me. Mrs. Emerson, we need to discuss your husband's upcoming testimony. Ex-husband, I corrected. I checked my watch. 3 minutes ago. Mark's head snapped up. Testimony? You said if I signed everything over... I said I'd help clear your name. I interrupted. And I will. But you still need to testify against Celeste. She's my sister. He stopped, closing his eyes. I thought she was... Mr. Emerson, Agent Roberts said firmly, we have evidence of her running similar schemes in multiple states. Your testimony could help other victims. Victims. Mark laughed bitterly. Like me? Or like Fiona? I gathered the signed papers. The difference is, I did something about it. Just then, my phone rang. Ruben. Turn on the news, now. The lawyer obligingly switched on the office TV. Breaking news banner. Escaped fraudster takes hostage at local bank. The camera showed Celeste, still in her prison jumpsuit, holding a terrified bank teller at gunpoint. I want to speak to Fiona Emerson, she was screaming. She ruined everything. Agent Roberts was already on his radio. Subject located at First National, requesting immediate backup. I need to go there, I said, standing. Absolutely not, the agent replied. She's armed and dangerous. She's desperate and cornered, and she won't hurt me. How can you be so sure? I held up my phone, showing them the text I'd just received from Celeste. Come alone. I'll tell you the truth about everything, including what really happened to Mark's parents' fortune. Mark went pale. What about my parents? That's what I'm going to find out. I turned to Agent Roberts. Let me talk to her. You'll have your snipers in position anyway, right? He hesitated, then nodded. We're a wire. 20 minutes later, I walked into the bank, hands raised. Celeste had the young teller in a chokehold, a small revolver pressed to her temple. Send her out, I said calmly. It's me you want to talk to. How do I know they won't shoot me the second I let her go? Because then you can't tell me about Mark's parents' money. Something flickered in her eyes. She shoved the teller away. Lock the door. I did, then turned back to her. So talk. You think you're so clever, she spat. Playing the long game, gathering evidence, but you have no idea what you're involved in. Enlighten me. Mark's parents didn't die in an accident. She laughed manically. The real Celeste didn't die of leukemia. It was all arranged. By Mark. My blood ran cold. What? Oh, yes. Your precious husband orchestrated everything. I was just an actress he hired to play his sister. He needed someone to help him hide the money he stole from his parents' accounts before he... She drew a finger across her throat. You're lying. Am I? Check the offshore account in Belize. Account number 547891. The transfers started 3 days before his parents' accident. I pulled out my phone, typed rapidly. My hands started shaking as the records appeared. He's not the victim here, Celeste continued. He's the mastermind. I was just playing my part. Until you ruined everything. Suddenly, the bank's phone rang. Celeste jumped. That'll be the negotiator, I said quietly. But before you answer, ask yourself, if what you're saying is true, why tell me now? She smiled, a broken, desperate smile. Because now we both have something on him, and I don't plan on going down alone. The phone kept ringing. You know what's funny? I said, reaching slowly into my pocket. I already knew about Mark's parents. Her face fell. What? Aunt Bonnie found the Belize account months ago. We just needed you to confess to your part in it. I held up my phone, the recording app blinking. And now you have. The windows suddenly shattered as SWAT team members rappelled in. Celeste screamed as they tackled her, the gun skittering across the floor. Outside, I handed the phone to Agent Roberts. You got all that? He nodded grimly. We'll pick up Mark within the hour. I watched as they led Celeste to a police car, then Mark's parents' killer to another. The long game was finally over. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Bonnie. Come home. You've done enough for today. She was right. I'd done enough for a lifetime. The courtroom was packed for Mark's arraignment. I sat in the front row beside Aunt Bonnie, watching my ex-husband shuffle in wearing an orange jumpsuit, a far cry from his usual tailored suits. How are you holding up? Maria whispered from my other side. Before I could answer, Sandra, Mark's mother's best friend, approached us, tears streaming down her face. Is it true? Did he really? I squeezed her hand. The evidence is overwhelming, Sandra. The offshore accounts, the life insurance policies he took out just weeks before. All rise, the bailiff called out. As the judge entered, I caught Mark staring at me. The entitled, controlling man I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood what it meant to be powerless. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, we have evidence that the defendant orchestrated the deaths of his parents through a staged car accident, using their fortune to establish an elaborate fraud scheme involving an actress posing as his deceased sister. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Furthermore, she continued, the defendant's accomplice, Jessica Patterson, has agreed to testify about her role in the deception in exchange for a reduced sentence. Mark's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. These allegations are based on the word of a known con artist. And bank records, I called out, unable to help myself, and witness testimonies and insurance investigations. Mrs. Emerson, the judge warned, please refrain from interrupting. Sorry, Your Honor. But I wasn't sorry. Not anymore. During the recess, Ruben found me in the hallway. Board meeting's been moved to tomorrow. They want to discuss the company's public response to all this. Tell them I already have a statement prepared. The company is cooperating fully with authorities and remains committed to transparency and ethical business practices. They'll love that. He smiled. Very corporate. A commotion erupted near the courtroom doors. Celeste, or Jessica, was being led in for her testimony, surrounded by guards. She caught my eye. Fiona, please, just 2 minutes. Against my better judgment, I nodded to the guards. They kept their hands on her arms but allowed her to stop. I need you to know, she said quickly. I really did care about Mark, like a brother. I never knew about his parents until after. Save it for your testimony. I cut her off. The time for bonding is over. You don't understand. There's more. No, I said firmly. You both played me for years. The only difference is you were getting paid for it. The guard started moving her again. Over her shoulder, she called out, "Check his storage unit in Newark, Unit 247. Aunt Bonnie appeared at my side. "Want me to look into it?" "No," I sighed. "I'm done chasing their secrets. Let the FBI handle it." Back in the courtroom, Mark stood for the judge's decision on bail. Given the severity of the charges and the defendant's substantial resources, bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody until trial. Mark's face crumpled. This man, who had controlled every aspect of our lives, who had orchestrated deaths and manipulated everyone around him, was finally facing consequences. As they led him away, he turned to me one last time. "I did it for us. For our future." "No," I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You did it for yourself. You always did." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. "Mrs. Emerson, how does it feel knowing your husband was a murderer? Will you continue running the company? Did you suspect anything during your marriage?" Aunt Bonnie stepped forward. "My client has no comment at this time. Please direct all questions to her legal team." As we pushed through the crowd, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Storage Unit 247. Trust me." "See." I deleted it without hesitation. "You're not curious?" Aunt Bonnie asked, watching me. "About another rabbit hole of lies?" "No. I'm taking back control of my life, not letting them drag me into more of their schemes." She smiled proudly. "Speaking of taking control, how does it feel to be the youngest CEO in the company's history?" I looked up at the clear blue sky, feeling the weight of the past few years finally lifting. "It feels like justice." "Justice is good," she nodded. "But don't forget about living." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've won. You've exposed them, saved the company, secured your future. Maybe it's time to focus on what makes you happy." I thought about that as we walked to the car. For so long, my life had been about survival, then revenge, then justice. I hadn't thought about happiness in years. "You know what?" I said, handing her my phone. "Hold this for me. I'm taking the rest of the day off." "And what will you do?" I smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in forever. "Whatever I want." The morning of Mark's sentencing, I stood in my new office, watching the sunrise paint the city's skyline in shades of gold. My phone buzzed. A text from Agent Roberts. "Storage Unit 247 contained evidence of 3 more murders. He's never getting out." I set the phone down and turned to the wall of photos I'd recently hung. Not the stuffy corporate portraits Mark had favored, but images of our employees volunteering at local shelters, mentoring students, rebuilding communities, the company's new direction. A knock at my door. "Ready?" Ruben asked. "Almost." I grabbed my coat. "How's the new security system?" "Ironclad. No one's accessing anything without triple verification now." In the courthouse, I sat between Maria and Aunt Bonnie as the judge delivered Mark's fate. "On the counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and embezzlement, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." Mark's shoulders slumped. He looked ancient, nothing like the powerful man who had once controlled my every move. "Would the defendant like to make a statement?" the judge asked. Mark turned, his eyes finding mine. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought I was protecting us, building something. I didn't realize I was destroying everything that mattered." "The time for apologies has passed," the judge declared. "Bailiff, remove the prisoner." Outside, Sandra grabbed my arm. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing justice for my best friends, for exposing what he did to them." I hugged her tightly. They deserved better. So did you. Back at the office, I found the board members waiting in the conference room. "Gentlemen," I smiled, "shall we discuss the future?" "Actually," the chairman said, "we wanted to show you something." He turned on the TV. A news report showed Celeste being led to a police transport van. Breaking news: Jessica Patterson, known as the chameleon con artist, has confessed to involvement in 12 additional fraud cases across the country. Sources say her testimony will help solve cold cases dating back a decade. Turn it off, I said quietly. That chapter's closed. Indeed. The chairman handed me a folder, which is why we unanimously voted to remove the interim from your CEO title. The company's future is yours to shape. I opened the folder to find my new contract, but instead of signing it immediately, I stood up. Before I accept, I want to be clear about something. This company isn't just about profits anymore. We're going to focus on ethical business practices, employee welfare, and community investment. If anyone has a problem with that, speak now. Silence. Good. I signed the contract. Now, let's talk about our new charitable foundation. I'm thinking of calling it Second Chances. Later that evening, I found myself back in Aunt Bonnie's kitchen, where this whole journey had started. I have something for you, she said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a photo I'd never seen before. My parents on their wedding day, young and happy. Where did you get this? Found it while cleaning out my attic. Thought you might want it for your new office. A reminder of where you came from. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from an unknown number. Congratulations on the CEO position. You earned it. Not all of us were born bad. Some of us just lost our way. See, I deleted it without responding. Some doors were better left closed. You know what I learned from all this? I said to Aunt Bonnie. It's not about revenge or justice or even success. It's about choosing who you want to be. And who do you want to be? I pulled out my laptop, showing her the plans for the Second Chances Foundation. Someone who builds things up instead of tearing them down. Someone who helps others find their strength, like you helped me find mine. She smiled, raising her coffee cup. To second chances. To second chances, I agreed. And to writing our own stories. Outside, the sun was setting on another day. But unlike before, I wasn't worried about tomorrow. I had learned that strength doesn't come from controlling others or seeking revenge. It comes from choosing your own path, even when that path leads somewhere unexpected. My phone rang. The foundation's first grant applicant waiting to discuss their proposal. I answered with a smile, ready to help someone else begin their journey of transformation. After all, that's what second chances are for.